I guess first of all, congratulations on this album. It's fantastic. It's brutal. It's an incredible sound that you guys have continued to go along with. For you, how do you feel about this being your sophomore album? It being such a high quality and it being so great the way it is right now.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that. We worked really hard on the second record. I always consider
Mhm.
a band's first record to more or less be like an introduction to the band, and somewhat in a lot of ways a band coming into their own, learning, you know, what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, what they need to, you know, work on for subsequent releases. And it's, a first record is always more or less kind of a glorified demo, in my opinion, for
Mhm.
bands. So it gave us a chance to really harness in on this record where we wanted to go with it. And, death metal has always been to me uh, a genre about pushing the envelope. You know,
Mhm.
I remember back in the day, like the early 90s death metal, that's what got me into death metal, is every band, each record was trying to be heavier and outdo the other one and be sicker and faster. Uh, and that's what we tried to do. That's what we wanted to do with this one is, more grotesque lyrics, more intense song titles, more graphic artwork, faster, heavier, more guttural. And I think we really accomplished that on this one. That was what we set out to do, is just make everything more extreme. And I really think we hit the mark on it.
Definitely, you could definitely say that these lyrics are extreme, but your vocals are also like powerful. They very much match the brutality of the lyrics. How do you begin to process the lyrics to the vocals you want to put out there?
Uh, it's usually it's a weird process because back in my early death metal days when I was in the band Oppressor, I was singing and playing bass. So uh, I always had to learn all the complicated technical bass parts because it was a very technical band. So I would write the lyrics and the vocal patterns around the riffs so that I could actually play the riffs and sing at the same time and be able to do both. With Embryonic Autopsy, it was a completely different animal because I'm only singing on this. So it gave me a lot more freedom to experiment vocally and use different vocal patterns, different kind of ranges in my voice and with like the death metal growls and stuff. So I felt a lot more freedom as just being the vocalist with this band as I ever have before. Because, first and foremost, I was always a bass player and kind of got strapped into singing, an oppressor. But with Embryonic, I just wanted to completely just focus in on the vocals, which being that I don't have to worry about an instrument or learning any kind of musical parts, it, definitely opened up my freedom and my time to really harnessing in on different kind of vocal sounds. I wanted to take a bunch of different influences on there. Like if you listen to it, you can kind of hear in some parts like almost Barney Greenway from Napalm Death type screaming in it. And then, you can hear some stuff in like the vocal fry register and, stuff that's in my own, personal voice and stuff. But I really wanted to kind of take a lot of different kind of genres like, grindcore and some Swedish death metal, the vocal fry register, and like just some utter, brutal death metal sounds to this. And I think, I think I was able to do that on this. It definitely gave me a lot of creative freedom.
Definitely, and I think for a lot of people who, you know, just barely, tap their toes into the water of death metal, they don't understand how the metal grunt does have a melodic sense to it. How do you explain to people when you talk about this tone, this, making it personal, taking it from influence? How do you explain that process?
A lot of people just don't understand it. Uh, that's why death metal and the extreme metal scenes are so, you know, select, and it's more like being in a private club, if you will. And that's something that I love about it is it's not mainstream. It's not for everybody. It's something that, you know, you have to really know to appreciate it. And something I always really got into, uh, being a death metal fan, is I always enjoyed the way the vocals accentuated the music. I mean, a lot of it has to do with the music and how heavy it is, how technical it is, how fast it is, and this. But the vocals in their own way, are almost a separate instrument sometimes when you get into the gurgling and the growling that kind of accentuate the overall brutality of it. So, I always, even if it's, I learned from John Tardy from Obituary a long time ago, because Obituary never used to put the song lyrics in their albums. And John Tardy was asked time and time again, why? And he said, well, I have some lyrics, but for the most part, a lot of it's me making vocal sounds and vocal, things that go around with the music. So I took a page from that. So a few of the things that you hear aren't really actual words, they're just kind of like sonic grunts and growls and screams and stuff to kind of accentuate what's going on with the music. And then I built the lyrics around that. And that's one of the great things about death metal and black metal and stuff like that are so much different than any other style of music. If you're a rock band or a hard rock band or whatever type of music, lyrics are the main component, and there's actual words to everything. With death metal and extreme metal, you can take a gurgling sound and make it something all its own, and it doesn't necessarily have to even be a word. It can just be like a sound. And I think that's one thing that's really awesome about death metal. It's another thing that kind of sets it aside to people, not accepting it, which is fine with me. I think the fact that throughout all these years that death metal's remained underground since it first came out, I think is an amazing thing. And it's part of being, a special club. It's like you see somebody wearing a death metal shirt, that's, that they're your type of people, that you have something very in common that you share. And it's part of being, like I said, part of being a special, unique club.
Definitely. Since your voice is another instrument in this album, do you when you go for the vocals, do you have the instrumentals already there for you to play off of? Do you first record the vocals and then the instrumentals surround that? How does that process go?
Well, what we've done in this band, at least for recording, is we've gotten, all the drums done first, then all the guitars and bass, and then I come in at the end and do the vocals. But for each song, I have all the vocals completely written out and all the lyrics, mapped out and everything for the entire thing. And then when we get into the studio, like you said, I'll sing all the vocal patterns the way I hear them in my head. And then, the producer will say, well, try this, try that. And then, sometimes when you're in the middle, in the heat of the moment and you hear something, it's like, man, a scream would be really cool right there. Or maybe like a really deep growl underneath of what I'm doing. And it just kind of all falls into place as you get in the studio. Once you're kind of feeling around and you're seeing what works and what doesn't, because at least for me, when I'm writing the lyrics and rehearsing them on my own, I'm hearing things in a different way in my head and the pattern in my head. But when you actually get in the studio and you're picking the things apart, some of the stuff doesn't work in there. Some of the patterns are like, it's just not jiving, or that syllable or whatever just isn't matching the way I thought it would be. And then you kind of change it on the spot and do that. But it also lends, examples of where, you go and listen back to the song and you're like, it could use a little extra there, or maybe it needs a little grunt there, or maybe we put something underneath of it here or there. And it kind of all falls together when you're in the studio setting for it.
Definitely. And like I said before, this is probably a very, one of the darkest albums I've heard in a while. It's bizarre in such a good way. Where the why follow up your previous album with like a second part? Because these songs do kind of continue the story of your first album.
I'm glad that you caught on to that, because that's exactly what we wanted to do. Is when we started this band, kind of to go back to the setting of it, I always, for some reason, I always thought that a great name for a song title would be Embryonic Autopsy. And I never had a chance to write, a song or lyrics with that in mind. And when Scott, our guitar player, came to me and said, hey, would you be interested in singing death metal again? I've got all these songs that I've been, working on and stuff. And, I'd really like to get your take on it. It just all fell together really simple, really easy. I mean, I just kind of slid right into what he was doing and it just all worked. And I was like, I've had this idea for a song title forever, Embryonic Autopsy. And I looked, everywhere, and no band was named that, surprisingly enough. There's usually always, every time you try to come up with a band name, there's usually always, out of 10 band names that you have, 9 of them are usually already bands or used up in this day and age. And there wasn't that. So I'm like, well, what if we called the band Embryonic Autopsy and kind of took the whole concept of, you know, starting from the embryonic stage. And me and Scott have always been fascinated with the alien, you know, the aliens coming down
Mhm.
from like the Aztecs and the Mayans and the Egyptians and stuff, and how the pyramids were built and how all that technology, you know, for that long ago, so many thousands of years ago, people still can't even figure it out to this day, and the whole Roswell thing. So we kind of played upon the fact of, you know, let's incorporate something like that into the
Mhm.
fact that, you know, these aliens gave us all this technology and things, and we're trying to develop alien human hybrids.
Mhm.
Uh, and you know, just the craziness that went on, that could go on with something like that, where, you know, experiments gone wrong, and, you know, the aliens ripping apart the mother, ripping apart each other to get out and get outside, and, you know, the whole thing centered around that kind of theme. And
Mhm.
it just kind of fell together kind of cool. You know, I mean, if you look at a lot of these you know, programs are on it and movies and stuff, and I always was fascinated with gore, you know, lyrics and horror movies and stuff. So we basically wanted to take this entire band into a, you know, like a horror movie set to music, but based
Mhm.
on the premise of, you know, starting from the embryonic stage and, you know, genetic alien human hybrids and things like that, and just kind of all tie it in. So where we started with the, you know, original title of Prophecies of the Conjoined, Origins of the Deformed kind of takes over, where, you know, everything's gone wrong, and there's there finally has been these hybrids that are actually have come to fruition, and everything's kind of going in disarray. And the whole story of, you know, the aliens wanting to retake the throne and conquer is kind of the whole premise of it. So it's basically it's exactly a part 2 of the record. And
Mhm.
if we, you know, when it comes time to do a third record or whatever, maybe we'll make a trilogy out of it or something like that. But it was a perfect continuation of it. And like I said, we just wanted to get more intense, more sick, more gross. And you can kind of see that with all the newer artwork we're using, and the more intense song lyrics and the more intense songs. So it's really cool that you picked up on that, because it's exactly what we were going for.
Yeah, and you know, some of these songs, they might seem, you know, grotesque, but they're so energetic. They're so brutal. They just give you like this very like strong burst of energy. You know, there's emotion in that. How does the band, you know, take that in? What kind of emotions are you trying to project out of this album?
We definitely wanted this record to be a true old school style death metal record. I mean, we all come from we're huge fans of the old, you know, 90s old school brutal death metal, being Incantation, Suffocation, Cannibal Corpse, Obituary, uh, Napalm Death. You know, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Even, you know, stretching into really obscure bands like Disembowelment and Demolic, and you know, Baphomet. I don't know whether you remember that band or not, but, you know, things that were just, you know, just so intense and brutal back in the day. And, you know, I was a huge My Dying Bride fan back in the early days when they were actually more of a death metal band and stuff. And uh, we just really wanted to bring that back, because, you know, nowadays you have deathcore, and I like the deathcore stuff. It's cool. It's an entire different animal than death metal. And death metal nowadays, if you've noticed, it's very, very technically intense. Like everybody just wants to outdo each other, you know, technically. And I think when you try to outdo and everything, and you're trying to, you know, constantly, you know, trying to one up everybody on the scene, it takes a little of the heart and the emotion out of it, to where your true uh, goal is. So what we did
Mhm.
on this is, we didn't want to be the fastest, we didn't want to be the grossest, we didn't want to be the most technical. We just wanted to really come from a place of, you know, the bare bones, the roots of what death metal is all about, which is guttural vocals, extreme vocals, you know, blasting drums, heavy guitars, interesting riffs, things that weren't quite trying to outdo any other bands that were out there, just doing what we really enjoyed, and going back to our roots of where we came from. And that was the whole goal of it. It really did come from the heart, and it really came from what we were feeling at the time. None of us were listening to any bands at other bands at the time when we were writing and recording this. We just literally just went by where our roots were from and what we enjoy out of death metal, and just poured it all out onto tape.
Not only that, not only that you accomplished that, but you brought in a bunch of guest artists to collaborate with, and they meshed together well with your music. How was that experience? And is there anybody else that you are looking forward to collaborating with?
Yeah, I mean, bringing in James Murphy, who in my eyes is not only one of the best extreme metal guitar players out there, but one of the best guitar players of all time. I mean, he just has such a style all his own. When you hear a James Murphy solo, you know it's James Murphy. And we were fortunate enough to have him play on the very first record, Prophecies of the Conjoined. But this time I really wanted him to be more a part of the record. And he played on 3 solos on the new record. And Jack Owen, now in 6 Feet Under, previously at Cannibal Corpse and Deicide, is a very good friend of mine. And he had some downtime, and I asked him to throw a couple of solos on, and he did. And Terrance from Suffocation, he put a solo on the last record, and I asked him if he'd want to put another one on the new one. And we brought in those guests, not only because they're really good friends and they're people that me and the rest of the band really admire, but it really added to the landscape of us wanting to stay true to the late 80s, early 90s death metal sound that we were really going for on this record. And what better way to pay tribute to that than to bring in some legends from those bands and from those days and that era. And they really did a lot of great stuff on there. I think, moving forward, I'd love to have more special guests. I think maybe next time having like maybe a guest vocalist on there, like maybe a Chris Barnes or a John Tardy or someone like that, or a Barney Greenway, people that really, or David Vincent, people that really influenced me as a vocalist. If we could maybe have them, maybe do a little back and forth, on something vocally on the next one, I think would be really awesome. We'll see where it takes us. We haven't even this new record, Origins of the Deformed, hasn't even come out yet. It's still due out in about another month. So we're going to see how that goes. We're going to tour all about it. In fact, we've got a really, really awesome tour that's going to be a really long tour that we're going to be part of in January and February. It hasn't been announced yet. It's going to announce in mid-June, but it's a stomper. We're extremely fortunate to be a part of it, and it's with a few upper echelon death metal bands, and it's going to be an awesome announcement, an awesome tour when we're able to speak about it.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad I got to hear this album because once again, very energetic. It's really brought me back to stuff I would listen to in high school. So thank you very much for this album, and I hope to get to see you live soon.
Oh, we'd love to come out and meet you, and thank you for understanding the record and appreciating it, and really enjoying it. That's what we hope everybody else out there that's into death metal and stuff like that can get out of it as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk about the record and everything, and we really appreciate the fact that you're into it and that you like it.
No, thank you very much for your time.
Well, you take care now, and hopefully we'll see you on tour. The January and February tour goes across the entire United States, so I think we'll be able to maybe throw back a few beers